So today we have the honor of interviewing Mr. Daniel Wenzel. He's a military strategy expert and also creator of Sagger, which is a strategic educational simulator. So I have some questions for Mr. Wenzel, and I'd like to get his take on the Russian offensive in Donbas. Mr. Wenzel based a lot of his research for his simulator on the teachings of Karl von Clausewitz, the Prussian general and military theorist, as well as other great generals of history's past. So through his answers, we can really glean a wealth of knowledge that will help us predict and understand what's happening in the Russian offensive in Ukraine today. Tell me, Mr. Wenzel, do you think that Putin will start this offensive on Donbas?
I think it's almost guaranteed that Putin will go ahead with that, I would call it a crazy offensive. He will do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, do you think that's advantageous for Russia?
I don't think it's advantageous for Russia. I think actually it's very highly damaging to Russia's interests as a state on a geopolitical scale. But it's advantageous probably to Putin, who feels that it's good for him.
So why do you think he's doing this, Putin? Why is it good for Putin?
It's good for Putin because he's big on saving face. And if he were to give up now this whole war after the fiasco at Kiev, then it would be indirectly admitting that the whole attack on Ukraine, this limited operation, as they call it, was misconstrued and was a failure. And he doesn't want to portray this as a failure because that would mean he would most likely lose power. He would be kicked out from the Kremlin, and maybe he would lose even his life. Who knows? So for him, he has to portray this war as a big success, which it is not.
That makes sense, because it really doesn't make sense that he could have a successful attack with such a low supplied army. I mean, if he wasn't successful in Kiev, why would he be successful now? Mr. Wenzel,
more that in Kiev, he had advantage of surprise, and he had well-prepared troops. I mean, well-prepared in his standards. Troops in the north, closer to their staging areas, and he attacked as a big surprise with the Ukrainians. Now there's no element of surprise because the Russians keep on talking about offensive in Donbas. So Ukrainians they know what's coming. They know that they have to get ready for Donbas defense. So there'll be no surprise. The units that attacked the Kiev direction and Chernihiv and Sumy direction, those units have been so mauled by the Ukrainians that they cannot participate in the war. Most of them have been withdrawn, and they are not going to be moved to the Donbas area. He needs to move other reserves to the Donbas area, and Russia doesn't have a lot of reserves. So they'll be sending new recruits there, untrained recruits to the Donbas operation.
Okay. So based on your knowledge of military theory, what do you think that Ukrainians should do in this situation?
My advice for the Ukrainians would be to actually go on the attack. As I was helping with, and you were too, as we're developing Sagger for many years, we're facing situations, a static situation that has to be broken and converted into a more dynamic kind of warfare. The best form of defense is offense. Ukrainians don't have enough forces to push all Russians out of Ukraine. So you have to be creative, a little bit like Israelis were creative in the Yom Kippur War when they crossed Suez Canal. They crossed it only at one spot. They picked one location where Arabs didn't expect, and they just punched through, went into Sinai, and not Sinai, sorry, Egypt proper from the Sinai, and got the Egyptians from behind and just pulverized them. The same here. Russians are extended along a long line along the Russia-Ukrainian border, going from Kharkiv all the way through Lugansk, Donetsk, Mariupol, Melitopol, all the way to Kherson. That's about 400-kilometer long defense line. This is cordon defense, effectively. That's what Russians are deploying, a cordon defense. And along that cordon defense line, they'll probably try to move forward at some point from that cordon defensive line. Most likely, they will have a pincer movement from Kharkiv, from Kharkiv area toward Kramatorsk, and then forces from Mariupol will go north and try to meet with the forces coming down from Kharkiv toward Kramatorsk area. Ukrainians should preempt that. And what really makes sense when you look at the map, it would make sense to concentrate all forces in one spot, attack in that one spot, break through the Russian defensive lines, and cut off big part of their forces. The area where I would attack is probably anywhere immediately south of Mariupol. I would just probably pick that place for a concentrated attack of concentrated Ukrainian forces.
That makes sense. By trying to have presence everywhere, the Russian forces have basically made them strong nowhere. Like the great Karl Clausewitz warns us that's a huge. That's why cordon defense is so ineffective. It just makes you weak, and it's not fit to block a major attack. So the Ukrainians can definitely take advantage of that Russian mistake. Mr. Wenzel, what will this do?
It would, if they attacked toward Berdyansk port on the Azov Sea, that's a line of about 75 kilometers. They would have to break from their current front line to reach Berdyansk. They would have to reach Berdyansk, cut the major communication line there, from there to Melitopol and Kherson, and that would cut off all the forces that are on both sides on the Don River around Kherson. That's where there's some significant Russian forces. Obviously, the whole Crimean Peninsula would be cut off, and the Russians would be facing on one side Ukrainian forces from Zaporozhye and Mykolaiv, and from the other side they have the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea. So they will be completely cut off, well, almost completely, from any supplies, possible supplies. The supplies that they would count on would be mainly by sea. But as yesterday there was a major attack on one of the flagships of a Russian fleet, the ship Moscow was blown up by the Ukrainians. Ukrainians have very effective attacking missile systems to combat ships coming from the sea. So supplying a big army by sea in those conditions with some small sneak attack units of Ukrainians with missiles, very difficult. So they will be in real trouble. The forces surrounded in Crimea and Kherson area and Melitopol would be really in big predicament, and the Russians would have to scramble to supply them. They'll probably try to break the surrender cauldron by attacking from Donetsk, going south from Donetsk, trying to break back and reconnect with their forces, but that's their weak spot for the Russians.
Mr. Wenzel, what would you do if you were Putin? The Russians are really not in a good situation. They're undersupplied. They've lost the element of surprise, but clearly court is not the way to go. So what would you do if you were commanding the Russian army right now?
If I were Putin and I was trying to save my hide, I would probably do what he's doing, although it really makes no sense, because he's asking for disaster. If he loses the second offensive, the public support in Russia may turn against him. But if I was looking at it from the Russia interest standpoint, I would see that Ukraine is definitely not a threatening force for Russia. They had no designs on Russia. They are not an enemy of Russia. So immediately negotiating some sort of peace would be the best thing for Russia to do. And peace can be had in one afternoon, but Russians would have to admit that their attack on Ukraine was misconstrued, and they would have to probably even offer some reparations for the tremendous damage they did. Can Putin do it? No, because he's so compromised by all those terrible crimes that were committed by Russian army in Ukraine, that I think it really makes sense for somebody else on behalf of Russia to negotiate this. I mean, he would have to go and somebody else would have to come in and negotiate peace right away, because Russia main interest is to their main enemy is really coming from China, and China really has interest in hurting Russia by taking away, in some fashion, the riches of Siberia. Ukraine is just totally not a danger to Russia. There's no sense in any war between Russia and Ukraine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wenzel. I think most of the world doesn't see a whole lot of sense in what Putin's doing right now. I'm really interested in hearing more about your take on the real danger from Russia, which you say comes from China. I can see that. So thank you very much, and I look forward to talking more about the Ukrainian conflict with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.